Well, hello, and welcome back to another Linux 18 Tosscast podcast. We are back by popular demand. Now, we have a full show lined up, so my co-host, Spatry, will let us know right now who is on the show. Take it away, Spatry.
All right, welcome to yet another fabulous Linux A team, and we've got an all-star cast for you guys today. We've got Edward, we've got Linux for you and me, we've got Quidsup joining us, Setkeh, Sneekylinux, myself, and of course our wonderful show host, Total OS Today. Check out their shows. They're going to be in the show notes. Everybody's shows here are definitely worth your time. Back to you, Total OS Today.
Thank you, Spatry, for that somewhat subdued voice. This time you only blew out one of my monitor speakers, and I do appreciate that. Thank you, sir. All right, so this is the topic for this show. If you are running exclusively a Windows PC and wanted to try Linux and maybe need a little bit of hand-holding per se, you have come to the right show. This is Linux for newbies, Linux for dummies, and I say that with all due respect, of course. Basically, frequently asked questions if you wanted to try Linux or ask a question but were afraid to ask. Now, let me get started with one of the most frequently asked questions today, and I get this every day, and this is really annoying, Spatry, but the number one question I get is, how many cups of coffee does Spatry drink in one day? I don't know. I need to purchase a new powerful calculator. Love you, Spatry. Okay.
Actually, I've cut back quite a bit. Now I'm only down to 3 pots a day.
3, I see. Very good. Okay, well, moving along, one of the real most asked questions is, what is the best Linux-based OS system for a Windows user? Now, there are many good ones out there, but some of you know that Zorin OS is probably my favorite. And by the way, congratulations to the Zorin team. I believe they just passed 2 million users, so great for them. So I like Zorin briefly because, number one, it's easy to install. It looks like Windows 7. You can navigate it through somewhat like Windows 7. And my feeling is, if it looks and feels like Windows, even though it's actually Linux, you are probably going to be comfortable with it and probably stick with it and not quit immediately. Now, I believe Spatry has a different version for you to try out. Spatry, what say you?
Well, before I even get into that, I'd like to get some of the other show hosts' opinion. First, let's start with you, Edward.
What distro would I recommend for a new beginner? It would be either Zorin or Ubuntu, because it's all about the user experience, and the easier it is for them to learn Linux and the easier it is for them to obtain software and customize it, I think it's the easiest way to get them hooked on Linux. It's all about them finding the benefits of using Linux compared to using Windows.
Linux for you and me, what's your opinion on that?
Once upon a time, I used to say Ubuntu until the Unity stuff started happening. I know that's controversial and some people like it, a lot of people don't. But it's still in heavy development, so I wouldn't recommend Ubuntu yet. I'd also used to say Linux Mint, but that's also in the works of getting fixed up with Cinnamon and all that. So what would I recommend to a new user? Probably something like Pinguy OS or even Zorin, yeah.
Now, Quidsup has a different perspective on this because he's actually using Ubuntu. Tell us about that, Quidsup.
Well, yeah, my preference has certainly been Ubuntu. It was the first distro that I started with, and in fact, I've stayed here pretty much. The Unity theme, well, love it or hate it, I like it. I think it makes a change from Windows, and for that reason, I believe it's a good one to try out.
Setkeh, what's your favorite distribution for beginners?
See, I'm more of an elitist sometimes, but I actually recommend something that you can navigate around in the UI. I recommend getting used to the UI for about an hour or two, and then you want to start getting the hang of the shell. So I would personally recommend something Red Hat because they're usable in the interface, but you still have to use quite a bit of shell stuff to get them the way you want them. So For a new user, I reckon going through like getting comfortable for about an hour or so in the interface, and then making yourself comfortable with the shell is probably a better way of going, in my opinion, anyway.
Now, Sneekylinux has been doing distro reviews for 5 years, so he's had a lot of experience with this. What is your favorite distribution for beginners, Sneekylinux?
Well, as for favourite, that's different. Right, as for a new user, I would go for Ubuntu, right, okay? But that's only if you've got recent hardware. If you've got older hardware, it's no good whatsoever, because you ain't going to get it all to work and stuff like that, is it? It's just going to go out the window. So, if you want to keep to Debian, I would say WatOS 4/5, which is like the Slackware-based sort of stuff. You get one application for one use, so that's really good. But if you want to play around, do a bit of Puppy. So we've got MacPup 525 or 528, which uses E17, not the usual JWM stuff. So you've got a nice little different background on your stuff, and you can have a little play around. Or basic Puppy would be Saluki. That's all I'm going to say.
And for me, there are so many distributions out there that are really nice for beginners. Now, if you're using modern hardware, I personally think Pinguy OS is the way to go because it has a little bit of everything in it. But there's also Zorin OS. I highly recommend that one. And then, of course, Ultimate Edition for that new user that must absolutely try a little bit of everything. It's all bundled up in there.
Okay. One of the other most popular questions I receive is if I download a Linux OS like Zorin or Pinguy, can I keep Windows or do I have to delete Windows? Absolutely not. There are several ways that you can try a Linux-based operating system. One of the ways, of course, is to burn it onto a CD or a DVD and reboot your computer. Now there is a setting in the BIOS, and this can vary. You may have to hit Escape, F10, F8, reboot, so the computer reads the live CD first, and you can try it before you install. Another way would be to use a free piece of software called UNetBootin. I have used that, mostly successful, where you can boot off the live USB stick and try it that way before installing anything. And now, that being said, if you do decide to install, make sure you follow the automatic installer, and it's pretty easy with distributions like Zorin, Ubuntu, or Pinguy. Take your time, read what you see on the screen. It doesn't take that long. But one final thing to say, make sure you back up everything just in case something happens.
I agree with you 100% on that. You know, there are a lot of different methods that people can try out these different distributions, either through a live disk or through a USB stick. Edward, what is your recommendation?
Yeah, like you were saying, you can try it out on a USB or a CD DVD. And most distributions, especially Ubuntu based, you can install alongside Windows. But there's also the trying it out on a virtual box as well, because then nothing gets affected with the system. They can still run Windows and do their own little applications. They can search through the applications they've got on Windows while they're at it and see what Linux alternatives they are. And it'll just make it easier to transition, and they can start by dual booting and then maybe make that full transition over to Linux, depending on what they need the computer for.
What are your recommendations, Caddy?
Remember that thing, I forget what it's called now, but you know how you can get this installed? Wooby. I'd probably recommend Wooby. I don't know how well it's working these days. It used to work fine, but it basically installs Linux to a folder on Windows, and it adds it to the bootloader, I believe. Or you might start it up from Windows, I can't remember. It's been quite a few years. But anyways, you run Linux from a folder in Windows, and it runs well. It used to run well. Also, as opposed to running like a live CD and all that, you know, it's obviously it's running from a live CD. It's slow. You don't really get a good feel for it. I think you get a better feel for Linux running it in Ruby.
Quidsup, what is your suggestion?
Well, keep it simple, really. Just make like an Ubuntu image to a CD, or use UNetBootin to write it to a USB stick. Try it as a live CD. If you don't like it, simply reboot, just go back to Windows.
Setkeh.
I'm actually quite partial to the VirtualBox method because, especially if you're not comfortable in formatting your hard drives or whatever, you can install the distro inside the virtual machine without affecting any of your live hardware. And the drivers and everything like that work essentially pretty well. And USB media and stuff like that is getting a lot better, but running a live distro from a USB stick, you lose every setting you make. So unless you know how to make it persistent and what have you.
Sneekylinux.
Well, for me, the live CD is still the king. But at the end of the day, do you have a CD drive? A lot of you have laptops that don't have CD drives, or optical drives, as we call them. So yeah, if you can actually get it on Ubuntu, or I won't say that again. No, I won't. If you can get it going down, no problem. Get it installed on your system, no problem, and use it from the USB stick. It's really, really good. Alternatively, you could just get a pup. You know what I'm saying? You know, I know you all know I like Puppy Linux. It's one of my favourite distributions for the simple reason it's so enormous. You can get anything you want to do. But on the other hand, if you want to use something like OpenSUSE, I would actually go OpenSUSE. Actually, if you want something that works day to day, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, day to day. I'm gone.
A lot of fantastic suggestions here, and something I wanted to point out. One of our listeners on IRC, High Six, mentions that you might want to choose a distribution that has everything included with it so that you can try out these different options. Okay, so yes, you can burn to a CD or DVD. You can also put this onto a USB stick, which I think is probably the most efficient method, because the USB stick is obviously going to read and write a lot faster than a DVD. And then, of course, Linux Mint came to mind for this particular example because it already comes with Wooby, so you can install it in your Windows system. And it also has all the codecs necessary for watching your videos and that sort of thing. And a lot of distros don't include that.
Many good answers. Terrific. Another popular question that I receive is, what if I download Ubuntu or Zorin or Pinguy, install it, and something goes wrong? Now you can't boot into Linux or Windows. What do you do? Well, hopefully, before you did that, you had a backup of your Windows operating system. And I believe many new Windows computers today, when you plug that sucker in and fire it up, it gives you a, well, not a warning, I was going to say warning, a little friendly reminder that probably says, would you like to create your backup disks now? Absolutely do that. I did that with my desktop. I think it was 3 or 4 CDs. It took a little time, but I have that just in case, because if something does break and you cannot get back into Windows, at least you have those emergency disks. Now, one last thing on this topic. If you do not have the disks, or maybe your computer was not capable for that, I have found in the past companies like HP, if you call them, and if your computer is still under warranty, I believe they will ship you the restore disks. I think you pay for shipping, but they will ship you the restore disks for free. But that being said, back up before, be careful what you are doing, because nothing works 100%. Spatry, how does that sound?
Excellent, but I've been also monitoring the communications on the IRC, and I happen to subscribe to this view that having a rescue live CD is essential. And there is a CD that has saved my tail on a number of occasions, and that is Knoppix. Also, Rescatux is really good too. So if you accidentally mess up your master boot record and you're unable to boot into either Windows or Linux, with Rescatux, it will actually allow you to restore grub so that you can boot into both operating systems.
Anybody else?
Go ahead, Caddy.
I was just saying that Super Grub is another ISO you can burn to rescue grub.
Quidsup?
Well, I've just seen a new tool. I think it came out a little while back. It's called Boot Repair. I think that's where an add-on you can put into Ubuntu. I'll post the link in the IRC chat for everyone for that one.
SysAdmGirl, are you with us?
Yeah, I think I finally got it to work. Sorry about that. But I completely agree. Like, it's really important for users to back up their data because you don't want them starting off their Linux experience on a bad foot like that. So always back up. And you could do it with a lot of software, but you have to pick a basic command line using DD.
Hi, SysAdmGirl. Surf's up. And by the way, welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Thank you again for the invitation.
You are very welcome. Okay, let me go through my notes here quickly. Yes, of course. Another popular question. Can you use or play Windows games or use Windows programs inside Linux? Well, yes. Usually, and I say that carefully because I prefer just to dual boot, and if I really have to play a game in Windows or use Windows, I prefer just to boot into Windows. There are programs out there called, Play on Linux and Wine. To be honest, I don't have a lot of experience in that. Spatry, you do. What do you say?
Wine has come a long way over the years, and it is starting to support more software. I've had better experience running my favorite Windows applications than I have had running games, but it keeps getting better, and it seems like there's a new release every 2 weeks. But I'd like to pass this on to our show host, and since SysAdmGirl had a little bit of difficulty, I'd like to pass the mic over to her and let her have first dibs on this one.
Please do.
I would love to answer the question for you, but honestly, I'm not a huge gamer. But I know Wine has come a long way, so if you're going to try any sort of gaming, start with Wine.
Sneekylinux, you're next.
Right, playing games, Windows games on Linux. Right, Wine is a good way to go. Play on Linux is even better, but if you really, really want the technical stuff, you're going to put some work into it, okay? Now, I have quite a few games working on Wine and quite a few Windows apps that I have to use because of the schools the kids use, okay? So you really, 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 really need to get into your Wine stuff and get stuff working, okay? Nice.
Setkeh.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about me being elitist. I like to work out of the terminal, so I generally just use Wine, and I've had good success with gaming in Wine. I've not had very much luck with applications as far as like Paint Shop and all that sort of stuff goes, or Photoshop or whatever. But I have got working on my machine install of EVE Online and World of Warcraft. So and it's not super difficult to do either. I mean, once you get your head around the commands that I use, but you could always install a front end for it too.
Quidsup.
Well, I found gaming a bit hit and miss within Wine. There's some games that work absolutely fantastic, better than they ever did on Windows, and then you've got the other extreme where they don't work at all. Well, the easiest way I found, and to check the compatibility of any applications or games, simply go on Google, type in Wine, AppDB, and the name of the application you're trying to run.
Caddy.
Yeah, bit hit and miss, unfortunately. Wine's good. Play on Linux is pretty good, apart from some versions being very buggy and some being better. It's sort of up and down. I would say if you're feeling adventurous and don't mind tweaking the hell out of it and doing research into how to get games to work good on Linux through Wine and all that, just bloody dual boot, because it's a pain in the butt. And I find that, like someone else mentioned, some games work really well. For example, I'll give you one example. I think it's Counter-Strike 1.6, I think it is. Works absolutely beautiful on Linux with Wine and Play on Linux. But then obviously you install some other games and the quality is never the same. It never works quite right depending on what it is. But also, like someone else said, you can go to that Wine app, is it AppDB or whatever website, and see the rating for it to see how well it works. But I'd recommend it's a dual boot.
Edward.
Yeah, I've got to admit, the best way to do it is to dual boot. I mean, the best luck I've had is using Wine Tricks or Play on Linux, but some games work, some apps work, most of the apps that don't work in Wine as well. Like I had issues with iTunes, etc. And I got Steam to work, but when it came to running the games that I previously purchased in Steam, they just didn't want to work with the graphics. So the best thing to do is just maybe put a copy of XP in dual boot that way, unless you've got a copy of Windows 7. Especially if you really want to game. Not a lot of us people like it, but if you're spending half your time faffing about on Linux to try and get the game to work, you're just going to lose interest in playing the game altogether.
Now, something I'd like to mention, because April 1st I put up a video saying I switched to Windows XP to play Minesweeper. But in actuality, what I did was I installed Windows 7 on a separate partition so that I could play some of my favorite games that I just could not get working under Wine, namely The Witcher, and I wanted to play X3 Reunion. But I've had wonderful success with running my Macromedia Studio apps, my graphics applications, and that sort of thing. I was able to get a 95% success rate on my applications in Wine, but as everybody has been stating, it has pretty much been hit or miss for me personally.
All right, to be fair, I really don't play any PC games on either Linux or Windows, but that being said, I've seen some of the reviews of Linux games and the graphics and the effects, and I'm just going to say it, Xbox 360 for the win. Okay, now everybody can boo if you want to.
Okay, now we've got another question that came up on IRC, which I think we should probably want to address. Some people may be concerned about tips for backing up their system before taking that plunge and trying out Linux. And so I figured this would be something really good that we could address. And let's start with you, SysAdmGirl.
Honestly, the way I usually do backups is with tar, and then I might just tar it to a file and I will copy that to a USB. But that's like maybe a low-level way, so maybe they might want to start out with something GUI-based.
Okay, and I think we're talking along the lines of backing up Windows as well.
Okay. First of all, a little tip. If you are shopping, if you happen to be shopping for a new Windows PC, try to pick one that will at least allow you, first of all, to back up Windows 7 before you install anything. My computer had a little bit extra nice little feature. It had a separate backup partition. So let's say I forgot to back up on DVDs or I was just too lazy. I believe I hit escape and I can boot into the separate clean Windows backup partition and reformat from there. Now it may take hours and that's a bit extreme and that may erase everything. I believe with mine it gives me the option to restore but not totally erase or erase. But that being said, if I'm trying a new Linux-based operating system, let's say I'm trying Arch, for the first time and I'm not really too familiar with it. I have 4 or 5 USB sticks and I have 2 large external hard drives. I back up everything that's important, family photographs, vacations, music, documents. I back up everything on two external hard drives. In the event that one breaks or crashes, I have a backup. Now there are other ways, of course, but for a Windows user, I would have to say that's probably the easiest way to do it. Spatry, have you ever had to back it up on an external hard drive?
I back up everything on an external hard drive.
Well, there you go, folks. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And nowadays, external hard drives, I don't believe are that expensive, right?
No, they're real cheap.
One other thing that I found really useful is just using Clonezilla. I don't know if anyone ever used it. And then you can just back up and it creates a file and it backs up your whole system. And it's really easy to use as well.
I was just about to put that one in because I've actually got videos on my channel. I use the SSH method, but Clonezilla is pretty self-explanatory. And if there's something that you can't figure out, then their website has tons of stuff on it. But I've actually created, and I call them fake snapshots because essentially it's just a live dump of a bootable image to a file that, and if something does go wrong, you can stick the Clonezilla CD back into your machine, and it will basically put that file back onto your hard drives with all your file systems and everything intact, so then you can just turn around and reboot. And once the restoration is complete, and you'll boot back into whatever you made the image of.
Quidsup, do you have any suggestions?
My preference is Clonezilla. Take the full disk back up, and when you restore it, it's straight back to how you were.
Caddy?
I've never tried Clonezilla before, although I'm pretty keen to give it a shot. I've heard about it myself. I got two hard drives. I just chuck all my stuff on the separate drive. But I suppose my recommendation is get an external hard drive.
Edward?
Yeah, use an external hard drive or use an internal with an external hard drive enclosure. If you've got the money, maybe fork out for a Drobo, because it works cross-platform, and just back up your system. If you're using a Linux distro, a lot of them come with backup software. There's plenty out there. Just make sure you do backup, and maybe even use online backup as well for all the important files.
It was also suggested that MS Backup for Windows XP, there is a replacement that backs up your files and folders, but does not require you to specify an external drive or USB stick that is large enough to hold all the data. Thank you, OptiChip, for that tip.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. On my list, what do I have? I have two more popular questions. One is, how can Linux be free? Well, from what I understand, it's really quite simple. Some of it is donations, some of it is advertising, some of it is sponsorships. Spatry, what can you add?
You can get a lot of distributions free online, but a number of times, for instance, Red Hat, they offer support for their Linux distribution. So does Canonical with Ubuntu. And that is support that you physically have to pay for, which helps provide with the funding. Then, of course, the advertising and that sort of thing. Edward, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, as Canonical, that has all these bigs like Dell and HP, and they'll be paying for them to use it in big corporations, and that's how they make their money. And they obviously must make money from the desktop side. And there's obviously advertising, there's selling the distributions on a physical medium, they make money that way, and just stuff like that, basically.
Caddy?
I think the top contributors, well, it depends what you're talking about though, like to the kernel, there's a lot of corporations that contribute code, and write free software for us. But I don't know, if you're talking about distros, a lot of it is user contribution time, donations. Linux Mint, for example, it's basically a donation-based model, and they are doing pretty well for themselves. What do they get? What is it? Clem doesn't even have to work anymore. He contributes all his time to Mint and pretty much has a full-time job out of it.
Quidsup.
Well, a lot of the Linux kernel I've been reading about is actually paid for by companies that are making the hardware. They're actually paying developers to submit code into the kernel. In fact, the bulk part of Linux is actually paid for there. It's free to consumers, free to distros. They're getting their money through alternative methods, through support, as you already mentioned.
Setkeh.
Well, that's it. Like the kernel itself, which is the integration layer that talks between your shell or your user interface or whatever you choose to use and the hardware itself. And a lot of that is either donated, like people have already said, or the big software companies and hardware companies will actually pay the kernel developers to also bits of code to help support their hardware and what have you, so that way the hardware developers still get the business from the Linux community and like the BSD and Unix in general.
How's this for funny? Microsoft are in the top 20 of corporations that contribute to the Linux kernel.
Sneekylinux.
All the big companies do contribute to the Linux kernel. So whether you like it or not, they're going to be there, okay? So, it's up to you if you like it or not. You know what I'm saying? So, NVIDIA are there, IBM are there, Lenovo are there. They all contribute. You know what I'm saying?
SysAdmGirl.
Well, there's also a lot of people that just donate their time and their code. Those people should be recognized, I feel, because I know they put a lot of time and effort. And of course, a lot of people donate money and time. And still, Linux is still really powerful on the server end. Many servers are running Linux out there, and there's a reason to keep that alive and going.
Excellent answers. I have one last question on my list, and I guess I saved the best for last. This is another somewhat popular question. And is Linux any good? Is the software any good, or the various pieces of software any good? I know that Spatry and SysAdmGirl lately knew some of the issues I had with drivers and compatibility and all that stuff. But I will be fair about this. I enjoy dual booting. I think it's wonderful to have choices, and in many ways, Linux is better than Windows, especially when it comes to security, ease of use. It usually tends to run faster, so on and so forth. But is it good or bad? Well, I guess the best answer that I can give a new Windows dual booter is there's a lot of good stuff and there's a lot of junk that may not be a lot of help, but honestly, if there are listeners out there who are not sure what's good and what's bad, watch these channels. Watch my channel, watch Spatry, Sneeky, Quids, Caddy, so on and so forth. We usually, from what I've seen of all the guests here, we usually tell it like it is, and we're all try to be somewhat diplomatic as possible. I know on my channel I started a new series, stable or horse stable, somewhat as a joke, but not really because, sometimes when something just, Spatry did one on, I forget what it was, and used the term stable and horse stable, but I could see his eyes. I know what he really wanted to say, but couldn't say it. Yeah, Spatry, you sound like Dr. Evil with that laugh. But anyway, the best diplomatic, pragmatic answer that I can give is a good or bad. A lot of it's good, a lot of it's bad. I suppose, if you wanted to be perfectly safe or upfront when you're downloading a Linux OS, install it at your own risk. I don't want to sound alarming because that's not really fair either, but back up everything first. Have a backup just in case. Most of the time, if you follow what we've been saying here and look at our videos, you're going to be fine. So that being said, I believe that a lot of it is good, if not most of it is good, but just like anything else, there's a lot of junk out there. Spatry, how do you see it?
Okay, before I go on the topic of software, I'd like to get SysAdmGirl's play on this first.
Well, it's my opinion that there's no perfect operating system. It's really up to each individual to choose for themselves. And like he was saying, that there's ups and downs in all OSs, but I feel like it'd be just really a lot of fun for more people to take advantage of the different Linux distributions out there because they offer so much to users. So if people just take a chance and just be willing to try even just a live CD, I think they'll find themselves really enjoying it.
Sneekylinux, how do you feel about the software that comes with most distributions?
Well, I don't actually have a problem with any software that comes with any distro I use, because I just use Linux. I don't need Windows, really. What do I need Windows for? Okay, Sneaky Boy, who is 7 years old, does get a bit of the ump when he wants to play some games and he can't play them because of certain things. But I've got him running wine for him, so it's no big deal. So, everything is there for you. It's all for free. You don't have to pay. And even the ones you have to pay for are even better than the Windows ones. Thank you. Do it for me.
All right, and Setkeh, what is your take on the software that comes with Linux? Also, you wanted to clear up some misconceptions.
As far as Linux and Windows goes, there's a lot of differences. Obviously, you can get viruses and things on Windows, and unless you physically install a virus onto your Linux machine and give it your root password, it's a lot more secure in that respect. Especially for doing things like if you just check your emails, or you play Facebook games, or you do a little bit of internet banking here and there. Linux is definitely a lot more secure than Windows for that sort of stuff. But you can't beat Windows' usability either, because it's stupidly point and click and mundane for the people that really don't want to learn anything new. And let's face it, there's quite a lot of people like that. If I went to my grandma and said, I'm going to put Linux on your computer, and she's going to go, do I have to learn something? And I say, yes, she's going to tell me to stick it. So, that sort of people like that, you can't help.
Quidsup.
Well, for 90% of what people are going to do on the computer, say got your internet, viewing pictures, listening to music, office documents, all that's perfectly easy to do in Linux. It's already there, included in a lot of distros like Ubuntu and Linux Mint. Although more for, say, the hardcore gamer, no good for them. As Setkeh said, you've got the better security in Linux. Don't need to worry about antivirus checker. So it's a lot quicker in that respect. It's a lot quicker and simpler.
Caddy?
Yeah, just going back for a minute to a lot of junk applications. I agree. There's a good mix of junk applications on Linux and a lot of good applications on Linux, but let's also be aware that most applications for Windows are generally made ready for production and sold. A lot of applications on Linux are developers, creating something, having an idea, creating something, and a lot of the time isn't ready for production, but they just release it and it evolves. For example, quite a good amount of applications on Linux hasn't even reached a 1.0 version yet, so Linux is really a platform also for people to evolve their software, and eventually, hopefully, it gets good. But yes, that's why I think there's a mix of good and junk applications.
Okay, and Edward's going to throw a wrench into this machine.
Most distros come with a decent amount of software for, like, say, internet browsing, email, voice over IP. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of rubbish applications for Windows, just as much as there is for Linux. But with Windows, half the stuff you have to pay for yourself. And I think it's really our job just to try and get the world to get on board with Linux, apart from all the gamers, obviously. But I think we just need to up that few percentage of the world's population who are running Linux to move that up a bit. And it's shows like you and all the rest of them to promote Linux, basically. Because as Linux improves, the applications get better, and more people who get on board, there'll be more videos for people to find out how to get around problems and everything else.
I just wanted to add, from what I was saying before, also, the software centers like Ubuntu Software Center is also a great tool for users to know what software is good and not, because they've got a rating system on there and comments and all that, so that's a good way to find out what's good and bad.
Yes, that's a good tip there, Kathy. I forgot all about that. Thank you.
All right, and my experience with the software packages in Linux, yes, you're right. There are some pretty bad packages out there, but there are a lot of really, really well thought out, good applications that are excellent replacement for the Windows alternatives that are out there. But something that Timmy mentioned on IRC, and this is something I can't stress enough to somebody who's brand new to Linux. You should always use your package manager or the software center to install applications on your system. This way you can be assured that you're not going to run any potential problems and that sort of thing, rather than going on a website and downloading a package and that sort of thing and trying to compile it. Although that's okay too if you feel comfortable with playing around in the terminal. But for somebody that's fresh and new to Linux, using a distribution like Mint, like Zorin, like Ubuntu, or any of the Ubuntu derivatives out there, a lot of those are geared towards beginners. They have wonderful software centers that you can just read through the description, a lot of times even see a screenshot of the application that you want to use. You can try it out, and if you don't like the application, you can easily remove the application and download and install another one. It's all right in one central location, so you don't have to go mucking about on the internet to find an application that's going to do screen capturing if that's something you want to do. There are 3 or 4 applications for every possible thing you can think of in Linux. Now, Setkeh has something that he wants to mention, so I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Okay, so like when Spatry come and said we were doing the A-Team today and we're covering Linux newbies, I actually did a little bit of Googling around and found quite a lot of good and really bad newbie guides. And an example of some of the really bad ones, like there's some really good ones on this website too that cover some really good stuff. But on Linux, beginnerlinuxtutorial.com, there is things like it's more of a fan voice style website, and those are the ones that generally have the good and the bad. Like I've got one sitting right in front of me now about speeding up your hard drive read and write by editing the A time in your boot, which for a more advanced user would be nothing, because once you understand the system, you're obviously going to understand how the things work. But there's one thing that I can't stress too much. Well, I can't stress it enough, especially with these sorts of tutorials, is you don't want to touch anything at boot time if you don't have to. Alright, so you might be losing an extra 3 or 4 seconds in hard drive read and writes because your A time is enabled, but if you disable that by putting in a NOAA time or something like that, the chances are you're going to lose something. Something could go wrong, and then you have to, boot into a live CD and chroot, and it gets quite complex when something does go wrong. I don't mean to sound alarming or anything like that, but I'm saying you want to try and steer away from the things that are telling you to edit things at boot time and what have you. Plus, there's articles out there, and they're very fanboy saying, why Linux web hosting is better than Windows. Okay, while Linux is more secure than Windows, there is a number of reasons why people would still use Windows. And the websites that put Windows down and put Linux on a very high pedestal above Linux, put Linux on a very high pedestal above Windows, exactly what makes us look like we're a pack of tards, because, Windows is a very legitimate operating system, and it supports a hell of a lot of stuff that Linux doesn't, like hot swapping hardware while the machine's still running. As far as I know, the Linux kernel doesn't support that. So, there's very valid reasons why people still use Windows, and in quite a few articles I've come across, a lot of them are saying, Windows is essentially crap. And it's not always true. You want to be careful about what you read on the internet. And I get a lot of people asking me about stuff, like problems they're having after reading stuff like this. And I just wanted to put it out there and make it clear that everything you read on the internet is definitely not the best thing.
Nice. All right, let me, I'm looking at the clock. We are running close to the end here. First of all, thank you to all of you for this podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure speaking time with all of you. I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. Spatry, my co-host, you're the best. All of you, you guys, lady, Tanya, you're the best. Okay, one last thing on this topic. From my personal opinion, from my experience, I believe Windows 7 to be the quality standard, at least from my personal experience. I think I mentioned this before. I've yet to have a virus attack my system. I do use a virus shield. It is necessary. And I have yet to see a blue screen of death. I just haven't seen it. Am I surprised? Absolutely. Now, if you guys want to snicker and laugh, that's okay. I totally understand. The final thing, I like Zorn because they don't necessarily release on a 6-month cycle. They release when ready, and that ensures quality. And I believe Sneeky has something to say.
Yeah, I do have something really important to say about the young rewired state. It's something happening in the UK and all over the world. We're getting young coders to get together in July and August. If you can get your young people to get into it, do it. If you don't want to do anything about it, no problem. But yes, do it. If you really want to know about it, get in contact with MML Queenie on Twitter. She'll tell you all about it. Or go and Google it and check it out.
Thank you. Let's go with some closing comments. I'll just start with SysAdmGirl. Go ahead.
I mean, the only thing I would like to let new users know is that they shouldn't be scared. It's only as complicated as you choose to make it. So if you're thinking of making the leap, go ahead and try it. I think you'll be really happy with your decision.
Sneaky.
Yeah, just do what you want to do. Linux is for you. It's your distribution. Do what you want to do with it. Hey, you know what I'm saying?
All right. Setkeh.
Well, my favourite way of looking at it is when you install Linux, you pick a distro that you think you might like. If you don't like it, try a new one until you find the one you like, customise it the way you want, and you're doing it right.
Thank you. Quids.
I would say go into Linux with an open mind. Don't try doing what you always did in Windows. So when you think you need an antivirus checker, when you think you need to defrag a hard drive, whereas you'll be running around for ages trying to find the answer. And the best trick is go in there with an open mind. You'll see Linux is just a different way of doing things.
I agree. Keep an open mind. Have some patience, and you never know what you might like. Caddy.
I would say have fun with it. Just because you want to try Linux, you don't have to get rid of Windows or nothing, so just use it in your spare time, pick a distro, or try as many distros as you possibly can, and just play around with all the desktop environments, the software, and yeah, just have fun with it, because there's a lot of choice out there.
I agree, Caddy. If I had to pick out one word, Linux is definitely fun. Edward, what say you?
Yeah, just a mixture of what we've all said, and like Spatry mentioned before, YouTube and Google are your friends, so it's a good job we've got people like us on YouTube to follow video tutorials and instructions on how. Don't be scared if you've come from Windows and go to Linux. Just don't make the entire leap of going, like, say, from Windows to only having Arch on your system. Start with, say, like Wubby or VirtualBox, and just work your way up and just see what works for you, because everyone needs to come things. Like you said before, don't treat Linux like you would Windows. You need to read the benefits of what it'll be for you, and just keep on YouTube and Google if you need any help.
Thank you. Spatry, why don't you have the last closing comment, and if you would be so kind to close out the show.
Absolutely. And, you know, these closing comments are all wonderful. Everybody said a little bit of something that I wanted to say. You know, Linux is a true work of human genius. It is really magnificent. It is the customizer's dream come true. You can truly make it yours. There are so many different desktops to choose from. There are a lot of different distributions to choose from, so I highly recommend watching each and every one of these shows. Everybody here that's present is a show host. I'm going to have links to everybody's shows in the show notes, so you can check out everybody's channel. They are all worth your time. A lot, you know, Sneekylinux, Total OS Today, Quidsup, Linux for You and Me, or as I said, as we've been calling him, Caddy in the show. These guys helped influence my decision to switch to Linux. So it's because they are here, and there is a wonderful wealth of knowledge on all of these shows. And yes, Google is your friend. And, you know, the Linux community is absolutely magnificent. If you're going for a beginner's distribution, definitely go with something that has an Ubuntu base. There are so many websites that, you know, will help you find the answers you're looking for, and odds are if you do run into a problem, somebody else has encountered that same exact problem, and they have a solution there waiting for you. It just waits to be found. Also, if you're watching my show, I try to be as proactive as I can with my viewers. If you have a question, just shout me a question. I'll try my best to answer it, and if I don't know the answer, I'll at least try and point you in the right direction, as well as anybody else on the panel here. Everybody is here to help, and you know, I just cannot sing the Linux community enough praises, and Linux itself, absolutely magnificent.
Spatry, I tip my coffee hat to you, sir. Thank you.
And thank you, all of you, for participating in the show. Once again, thank you, Edward. Thank you, Caddy, Linux for You and Me. Thank you, Quidsup. Thank you, Setkeh. Thank you, Sneekylinux. Thank you, SysAdmGirl. Thank you, Total OS Today. And most importantly, thank you, all of you who are listening to us live right now. And thank you to all of you who are listening to us live on YouTube. If you go ahead and press comment, like, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you all for listening, and we will be back again sometime in the near future with another fabulous AT.